last time we spoke, we talked a bit about how Vladimir Putin discusses things that aren't necessarily even for the rest of the world. He
Yes.
says things, he doesn't really care if the United States and the Western world believes him. He says them so that his people hear something. Is that the case with his accusations, whether it was the first time with it being just the Ukraine and the next time being okay, but with a lot of Ukraine influence? Do you think that he made those accusations because he really didn't care whether the U.S. believed him or not, and it was for his people? And if so, I think more importantly, what I'm really asking is, did it hit the mark? Do you think the people of Moscow and of Russia hear him say that and believe that it wasn't really an ISIS attack? It was really choreographed by Ukraine.
That, I think, is the main motivator for him coming out and somewhat taking it back a notch in terms of solely blaming it on Ukraine supported by the West. It was becoming a little bit ridiculous, even for domestic consumption, because he has to be very careful right now in terms of messaging at home. We're not talking about border regions and border cities anymore, as we did last time when you and I talked. We're talking about Moscow. And even if it's on the outskirts of Moscow, where the theater is located, nonetheless, we are still talking about the capital of the Russian Federation. He cannot play this down. He also cannot pretend that it's not that big a deal. It's all the way over there. It's very close to the border. We've got it under control on the border with Ukraine. This is Moscow. And he has to talk about the attack and its aftermath with maximum urgency. And he has to show everyone, not just at home, but also others, and I would say also those in China, Central Asian states as well, that he's got this situation under control, that he takes it very, very seriously. If he continued to deflect on the ISIS connection or completely ignore it, or at the very least bypass it in his statements, it would have turned into a little bit of a farce, but also not put him in a very convincing position with other countries and his own constituents, the countries that matter to him, that is, right? In this instance, it's Central Asia, it's China, it's what Russia likes to talk about as the global South, where it sees itself as one of the leaders of the global South world and the world order. So he has to be very, very careful. And he had to get a message out there that was slightly more convincing than the one that he came out with 19 hours after the attack. And one other point that I would emphasize here is that the local population, even though we tend to think about Russians as the one and the same, right? So it's all of Russia thinks X, Y, and Z. All of Russians love or hate Putin. It's really not that simple. And we had this discussion last time, Ali, when we talked about how there's many different layers of the population. And there is also increased connectivity when it comes to the internet, even though it is becoming increasingly challenging to access certain websites. And open source as such is not as accessible anymore. VPN has not been entirely banned as of yet, even though they tried to do so at the beginning of this month. So a bunch of people have access to a variety of different theories that simply don't gel with the official narrative. So he had to come out and have an answer, not just for those who are sort of religiously watching Russian state media, Russian television that is controlled by the state, but also those who have access to other versions. What can he give them so that he doesn't entirely lose them, and above all, lose his credibility with them? Because this is the man who was celebrating just under a week earlier his 87% win.